So, once more for the anti-vaxxers in the back, vaccines do not cause autism. Thank you.
So just because you make a statement that claims vaccines do not cause autism to the cheers of a studio audience does not make that statement a fact. Let's listen to some real facts straight from a pediatrician.
So I commissioned an independent quality assurance project. That's the only way you can do it. This guy who came in, Dr. Graven, he had no interest in any agenda.
No skin in the game.
Not at all. He's a scientific nerd. Sorry, Dr. Graven. He really is. The guy's brilliant. He has set up health informatics systems in 45 countries.
Wow.
And he did a deep dive into my data, and I said, just to begin with, find how many are unvaccinated, and then list all the vaccines that everybody got in my practice who was born into my practice.
Okay.
Because I attract so many families like your example.
Right.
You've got a couple kids, you've got
yeah.
So let's just do the ones born into my practice who get the advice that I give, which is informed consent, you're in charge, here's the risks, the benefits, and the alternatives for each vaccine. It turned out he found 3,345 patients born into my practice in the last 10.5 years.
Okay.
So this is just a perfect sample size. Right. Let's look at the outcomes. I said, look at their vaccines, every single one of them, and let's just start with autism. That always seems to be the elephant in the room.
Sure, right.
So he looked at it. Here's what he found. There were 715 with 0 vaccines, unvaccinated, out of those 3,345. 1 case of autism.
Okay.
All right. A rate of 1 in 715.
Right. We're currently at right around 1 in 36 or 1 in 50,
45, whatever you want to, whether
depending
it's...
on which study you're looking at.
Right.
I actually personally think that the 1 in 36 in New Jersey, because they're the ones where doctors really are mandated to sort of report the autism.
There is a lot of underreporting. There is a lot of underreporting.
So we're somewhere, I think, in the 30s, but go ahead.
So 1 in 715, Dr. Graven said, Paul, this is real world data. This is amazing. He was shocked.
Wow.
And I had no idea what we were going to find. I mean, I had a clue because my patients are so incredibly healthy.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got 2 waiting rooms, sick and well, and there's hardly anyone ever in the sick side. And my well side is just overflowing packed. So I'm like, this is different than how I used to be when I practiced. Well, what about the others who were vaccinated? So we've got 2,645 partially vaccinated.
Okay.
They got anywhere from 7 or 8 vaccines up to about 16 or 18, I think was the most. Most kids this age would have had somewhere between 25 to 40.
Got it.
So they're like, slower.
Right.
Those patients mostly followed the vaccine-friendly plan.
Okay.
But I do want to clarify for your listeners, because I'm not promoting the book, I'm not promoting the vaccine-friendly plan, I'm just sharing data.
This is just data.
This is just data.
Just what it found.
There were 6 cases in those 2,645 for an autism rate of 1 in 440.
Wow.
Compare that to 1 in 40 or 1 in 45.
Yeah.
This is a 1,000% improvement.
Right.
What would that mean for real-life Californians? We have about 400,000 births a year in California, and if you reduced the data of autistic kids, we would be saving 9,000 cases of autism every year.
Just in California?
Just in California.
Wow.
In the country where we have 4 million births, we're talking 90,000, almost 100,000 cases of autism per year being spared if you believe this data.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So sometimes I ask, well, what do you think? Do you believe it? I don't know. It's real life data, as Dr. Graven said. He says there's nothing more powerful. It's more powerful than a study.
And also, don't treat autistic people like their existence is worse than a pandemic.
And this is the very typical, very scuzzy tactic that is used to attempt to vilify people who have a very legitimate, valid concern about, at the bare minimum, a correlation between vaccines and autism. While we should simply ignore the ever-increasing stats with the enormous, at least correlation, if not probable, causation between vaccines and autism, and just allow this increasing stat whereby 1 out of every 2 kids at some point is going to have autism, which may require lifelong help, including adult diapers and on, as being just something that is good as compared to a pandemic. How is that not a pandemic itself?
We are seeing the impact of anti-vax beliefs now. So far in 2019, measles cases have been reported in 15 states, with 6 outbreaks and 3 states declaring a state of emergency. It's important to note, measles is one of the leading causes of death in children worldwide and was fully eliminated in the United States in 2000. But now there are outbreaks, and if vaccination percentages dip much more, herd immunity could end.
So the measles were eliminated back in 2000, and yet now we're having these outbreaks. But of course, we'll wait. It's because the contaminated parties are flying into our country from other countries where there are measles outbreaks. So that's of course how they caught the measles to begin with. It would never be because there would be any kind of release of measles into our population, say by the pharmaceutical companies.
Vaccinations would be rendered far less effective. Despite the reality of what happens when children contract these diseases, there are anti-vax bills proposed in 20 states and almost 500 anti-vaccination websites. On the other side, there are simply studies from the CDC and World Health Organization whose reach and sway is often dwarfed by that of the anti-vax lobby. And who are you going to believe? Leading authorities on medical science or 800 memes on your cousin's Facebook page?
Yes, let's break down these leading authorities on medical science, and we'll go straight to the stats that we just showed you, where the CDC themselves talk about 1 in 45 kids now being diagnosed with autism. Folks, it didn't used to be like this. I'm middle-aged. When I went to school in the 70s and 80s, do you know how many kids had autism? Basically none. So from there, let's go on to the CNBC article that talks about the 3rd leading cause of death in this country being what? That's right, folks, doctors. Doctors are the 3rd leading cause of death. Now we go on with a Johns Hopkins study that shows that perhaps even those stats are underreported. Now think about it. If a doctor is not required by law to report certain instances of them causing harm or doing something wrong, do you think they're always going to report it when something does go wrong? I mean, there's an ego issue there. There's a possible job loss there. Of course not. Not unless they're legally obligated to. And Johns Hopkins recognizes that the stats are incorrect because of this problem. Now, do I want to trust people who are the 3rd leading cause of death in this country? The stat doesn't change, folks. News reports come out every few years showing doctors are always in the top 5 causes of death.
Of all the incredible scientific achievements in human history, electricity, space travel, mood rings, vaccines are one of the most incredible.
Isn't it interesting how she uses an attempt at humor, which by the way is absolutely horrendous, coupled with mockery of the people who are concerned about vaccinations causing injury to their babies, infants, and toddlers, using humor and mockery as a tactic to try to convince people. Why would they do that? The mass mentality. People who can't think for themselves latch onto that. They take advantage of people's ignorance and stupidity, of which there is an abundant amount in America. I think anyone watching my videos knows this full well. However, Samantha Bee, this subject matter is not a laughing matter. It's not something to be had fun with. What you should do instead is show your stats, just as I just did. Show the stats, proving that vaccines are not causing this problem, proving there is no correlation, there is no potentially high causation that could be definitively linked. And again, you can't tell one of my close friends whose child was vaccinated and was fine before the vaccination and acquired symptoms, quote, of autism after the vaccination, that the vaccine didn't cause it. It is clear-cut common sense, cause and effect. Thanks for watching, folks.
You're going along with the vaccine-friendly plan or Dr. Sears' approach or some slower approach, which is probably a wise choice. And your child starts to have some delays or what I call glitches. You know, had one this week that was starting to flap. They were brilliant in every other way. Fine motor, gross motor language, even eye contact with somebody, they're starting to flap. Or maybe they start losing some skills, a little bit of loss of eye contact, a little bit of loss of, you stop. No more vaccines. That kid just gave you a signal, a very strong physical signal, I'm having trouble. My immune system's having trouble.